is the former CTO of Etsy. She spearheaded innovation and digital transformation. And over the course of her decade-long tenure at Etsy, she played a leading role in critical initiatives such as launching Etsy's product development principles, driving mobile and app penetration and buyer growth. She played a pivotal role in Etsy's growth from 500 million to 13 billion in GM, and she's an investor and advisor at tech startups and nonprofits. This fireside chat is moderated by Jenn, Clevenger, Etsy Vice President of Engineering. She's an engineering leader with over 20 years of experience across many industries and technologies. She has led various engineering organizations at Etsy, including data engineering, machine learning, experiential platform and science, and now inventory. And today our teams are responsible for designing, building, and innovating the systems that enable Etsy to build product experiences to highlight sellers' unique items. So please do bring your questions in the chat for Rachana and Jenn, and they'll be happy to answer them. We're excited to welcome our keynote today. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. How are you? It's so wonderful to be here today. Rachana, it's so great to see you again. Rachana and I have worked together for many, many years. So we're going to have a chat among old friends here today. And I hope that you will all join in and be part of the discussion. I'll just kick us off. Like, the topic of our talk today, I think, is a really important one. You don't have to do it alone. The power of letting go to accelerate action. And I think it's such a great topic because, at the heart of the problem, if we want to dig straight into the good stuff, why are we talking about this topic? Why is this a great and juicy topic to talk about? Why was Rachana so excited to come and have this discussion with you today? This you don't have to do it alone vibe. So maybe we can start off with this centering question, Rachana.
Sure.
Why do you think that women in tech often feel like they have to do it all alone? Why does this problem exist?
Yeah, it's such an interesting, complex question, Jen. And yeah, very excited to be here with Jen and all of you. I'm reading the chat on the side. So many fantastic women from everywhere. So excited to be here. And coming back to Jen's question, which is a really complex one. I don't think there is one or two reasons as to why, but I will try to pick a couple of things I think contributes to this factor. First of all, if you're a woman in tech, you typically are already high achieving, have done very well academically, have been driven most of your life, and the typical type A overachieving types attract tech in general. But especially if you have to succeed as a woman in tech, you have to be 5x more than the average for that. And that is a certain personality type, right? You're fiercely independent, you've always not followed the norm or the path, you've done things on your own. I think that's one factor. And the second one is also a little bit of cultural conditioning. That is an even more complex one in many ways. I think the American culture, which is very much focused on self and independence, is fantastic for many things, but it also has cons where you're so used to being from the time you're a kid, you're taught to be completely independent, do everything on your own. Whereas, a lot of us in the group can relate to this in many other cultures, be it across Asia, or I've even lived in Mexico and Latin America, in so many cultures. The culture is on family and group and community. The things you do, the consequences of your action, whether taking a new job, you've not just your immediate family, sometimes you think of larger groups. There are cons to that as well. So I have always thought of us as I'm a mixture of both American and Indian culture. How do I take the best from both of being fiercely independent, but also relying on a community and family and friends or coworkers when needed and asking for help? It's still a tricky one, but I think those two factors are, driving this in many ways. But I'm curious to hear from you, Jenn. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I like huge +1 to the desire to be fiercely independent. I feel like there's so much pride wrapped up in that,
Yeah.
for women in particular. And then also, you bring in the complexity of like different cultures and backgrounds. There's just something about that you know, creates a sense of pride in me that definitely has gotten in the way before, of me asking for help when I need it. But I think another perspective as well, which I bet you will also agree with, is being a parent, like a working mom, right?
Yes.
So like, if I can be a little bit spicy, so I heard someone say this once and I loved it so much because it like resonated with me to the core. But I would say, overall, women are expected to work like they don't have children, when you're at work.
Yes.
And then at home, you're expected to parent like you don't have a job. So
Yeah.
because of that, it always feels like you're not doing enough. Like I always feel like I'm not doing enough.
Yeah.
And I think if I am reflective about it, I take that very personally. So it makes me feel like I'm failing. And so with that backdrop, like what high achieving person is going to ask for help when you think you're like already not doing enough, but we're just like being stretched thin across these two basically full-time jobs, like being a parent and then being a working person. It's just, it's so much. And my imposter syndrome, like at every level, imposter syndrome follows you around. Like it will keep saying like, I'm not good enough. I need to get good. I need to get better. And that inherently isn't an alone activity. Like making yourself feel like, oh, I need to like bring myself up to the standard where I think everyone else is, like that's a solo activity. So it makes it really hard if you're like in that space to ask for help. And in my imagination,
yes, everything you said,
right? Like Rachana, like I feel like in my imagination, I see whole scores of women like off in corners alone, thrashing themselves for not being good enough and like trying as hard as they can to like prove that they are. And like that's like inherently an alone activity. So it's great to talk about it because then I think it helps to encourage everyone to be like, no, we should especially be helping each other and we should be unabashedly asking for help because everyone else is,
And the imposter syndrome is real, right? It doesn't matter whether like I had the same challenges when I was more early in my career. I had the same challenges when I was CTO. So it's And that combined with all the other things, it's a lethal combination in some ways.
It's a lethal combination. Okay, so let's so now we are like grounding ourselves in acknowledging that this is a problem. At least hopefully this conversation is resonating with everyone. Tell me about the moment or a moment or moments, doesn't have to be just one, where you realized that like, oh, I need to be a person that asks for help to be successful, and this will actually make things easier, faster, stronger.
Yeah, that's a great question. If there have been many times that I have felt like I have to ask for help, but if I have to felt back to your example of being a mom and
Rachana, you're like breaking up a little bit. Is it just for me?
Is this better now?
It's a little robot-y. Can you say something else?
Is it better?
You have to say a few more sentences. Yeah, it's still super choppy. Is there like another?
Sorry, can you all hear me?
Yes. You look frozen, but I can hear you. Oh, now you're gone. I can't hear you. Can you hear me? Oh, I think maybe she's reconnecting.
Yes, I switched. It was the perfect time while I'm in a talk for my internet to be flaky.
Of course.
So I did switch my internet to another network. Hopefully it stays good. Sorry about that, you all.
Yeah, it's great now.
yeah, I was going back to saying if I had to pick one moment where I
Yeah.
really felt desperate for needing more help was when I became a new mom. And it was really difficult both at home and at work to ask for help. It's
Yeah.
also, my son is 9 years old now. So I'm just saying his age so that people know this was pre-COVID when a lot of people went to office 5 times a week. And I was struggling to just like stay afloat, just to feel sane in the first year.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, Etsy has a very generous parental leave policy. And even with that, I felt that way. I don't know how people who have no parental leave, how they manage. I know it's,
It's
but
crazy.
yeah, I did feel really desperate that year. And to ask a simple thing from my manager, like, can I work from home on Fridays? I was so nervous to say that. Just one day a week, can I work from home Fridays? Usually I don't have too many meetings. And post COVID, it feels so normal in that sense. But he was like, sure, yeah, you can work from. We have remote engineers. And I struggled to ask that for a month. I'm like, how do I approach him? What do I ask? I
Mm-hmm.
also had to say, in typical Etsy, we've always had a very supportive work culture that way, but it was all in my head. And I felt
Mm-hmm.
even the same way at home, right? Hiring help is expensive. Should I hire more help? Very grateful for, again, I asked my mom, I asked my mother-in-law. It was all going outside the comfort zone because once I went to college, I had almost like, or graduated college, not asked for anything from my parents. Just to again suddenly asking for help felt really uncomfortable with like both me and my spouse working. So once I got over that really weird feeling and things started getting better, I felt like, oh, then maybe I can ask for help in different ways. But yeah, you tell me, when did many moments? Yeah.
So many. I mean, you probably remember this one because we worked together at the time, but
Yeah.
I think one moment that stands, I mean, I feel like for me, it was a long learning over time that
Yeah.
eventually got me comfortable with asking for help, sort of like what you're describing. Having a kid was definitely one of them. But one thing sticks out in my mind because the CPO at the time, a woman named Kruthi, she extended me a really nice kindness by giving me this advice. I was in a position where I was reporting to someone. They were moving up and over into a different area of the business, and I was supposed to move up and take his role and like lead all of data engineering at the time. And I felt very unfit to do that job because this person who had that job before me was really marvelous. And Kruthi took me out for a coffee and she's like, oh, congratulations. This is going to be such a great role for you. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to put these shoes on. These shoes are too big. And she said to me, every leader, you don't have to lead like the leader that was there before you. You're a different person. You have different strengths, different areas of opportunity. So does that person. Lean into the things that are your strengths, and the things that you need help with, ask for help. And the things that you think that you can get better at, ask for help and improve. Or the things that like you don't really need to be great at those things, hire someone to do those things for you and fill that gap. Like surround yourself with the support system that you need to help you to be effective in your job. And for every person, that village that you build around yourself, or the things that you do, or the places that you ask for help to fill the gaps that you have, that is the thing that is going to help you be successful. And it was just so meaningful for me to hear, like at the time I was much more junior, it was very meaningful for me to hear that advice from someone so successful. It's like, Kruthi was the CPO at the time. I know that she had worked her way up through Etsy through many, many years, and many, like you and Kruthi are very close as well. And so I think in that moment, there's just this realization like, oh my God, even you ask people for help, and that is how you are successful. I'm like, I can do this too. It was very eye-opening for me.
You did that new job, wonderfully well. Much
Thanks,
better than your
Rachana.
predecessor. You were fantastic.
Thanks, Rachana. That's very nice of you to say.
I think it comes at every different stage, right? Even when I became CTO, like a public company CTO job comes with, I was the full office of CTO. I was used to having large teams, managing large teams, and having an executive assistant as VP, but like a full office of CTO came. It's a full team of people that are there to make you successful. That was like for the first couple of months very weird for me.
I bet.
And how to ask them for help.
Yeah.
And then I very quickly realized there is a reason why there is an office of the CTO, and that without them, I just can't be successful. And they were really pivotal in making me successful. But that comes from me having clarity of vision on how best to ask them for help. And they will do a lot of things voluntarily on their own very well. Like Megan, whom we both love, who was my EA, was fantastic at her job on doing things on her own. But there are also certain things, and she actually always gave me very good advice, having worked with many executives over the years. No one knows the executives' overall life better than the executive assistants. And she told me, having been with so many male executives, when you're working with a women executive, just the mental load of a lot of men at C-level don't think about what's for dinner today, what's the grocery list,
right?
And just the mental load of those things. And everyone's different. You tell me, like at work, how can I help you? Which was also good to know, like the insight of like you have to by default do much more than what someone of the other gender in your job would be doing. Even when you have a very supportive partner at home, it's just you're conditioned differently, both by the society and just the biology.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. It's different for women. Another thing I was thinking of while you were talking is like, I know there are a lot of people I can see in the chat, a lot of people like who are out there looking for work. When I got this job at Etsy, I was in between jobs, and I was working in finance, and I really wanted to break out of that large. I was working at large, my jam was like large corporate finance companies, and I was trying to find something a little bit more enjoyable for me. I didn't love it. But it was really hard because my resume was very shaped that way. So it was hard to get companies like Etsy to look at my resume. And so, and I'm at the time I was much younger, and I had a lot of pride, and I felt like fiercely independent, and I didn't want to ask people for help, and I didn't want to be the type of pushy person that's like pushing my resume, like leveraging people that I don't know that well, and like, hey, can you find somewhere to push my resume? But I did it. I swallowed my pride, and I had applied to a bunch of jobs at Etsy, and I never got called. Like your resume goes into a pile, and sometimes it's just like hard. There's so many resumes. And so I called as many people as I knew that may or may not have some sort of connection to Etsy. And I like begged and borrowed and stealed like airtime to try and just at least get my resume in front of like one hiring manager. And so that was an example of a time where before then I'm not a person, like I'm terrible at negotiate, like all the things that probably men are better at, like negotiating their salary, being pushy, but writing a resume that's like very aggrandized, like I'm not good at those things. And that was a moment where I felt like proud that I had done more asking for help than I normally would have, and it resulted in something that I think wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been so asky, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. And it's again, I got a job at Etsy because of asking for help from a complete stranger.
Interesting. Tell that story.
And because people are discussing networking and other things on the chat, I'm happy to share the story. Etsy does this. We have a blog. It's our engineering brand called Coda's Craft. We also used to do a lot of in-person events for that pre-COVID. Then we've done some virtual ones. As much as I like these virtual networking events, one of which we are in right now, there's also something to going out of your comfort zone and doing some in-person networking as well. Someone I used to work with before got me to Etsy Coda's Craft event to learn about experimentation. This was like 2013, so it was really long ago when experimentation was kind of new and hot. And I thought like the team was fantastic, the technology and the people, really cool work, and the mission for our sellers, it got me very excited. And I'd met an engineering manager at the event, and he was like, oh, you'll be, I was talking to him again. I won't name them, but my friend who got me is now at Etsy, but they really wanted to get into Etsy. And but she's more shy than I am inherently, and she was not talking to anyone. I was like, I'm fairly extroverted, like I can talk to anyone, like in an event. And then he was like, oh, apply for the job. I was like, yeah, sure. And I applied and I got auto reject. No one had looked at my resume. AI system, I'm sure, like AI was not that advanced in 2013. I got auto reject. Then I found him on LinkedIn and I was like, hey, you told me to apply. I applied and I got a rejection. And he said, oh, I'm happy to refer you. And he referred me, and that's how I got my interview at Etsy.
Yeah, that's huge.
And now that I'm again to provide people the context, I stopped being CTO at Etsy early this year. I'm still like more or less advisor and things like that, but I'm again thinking about what is my next step look like. And I think the same advice still applies at many different levels, right? Like I was talking about asking for help. Like all the previous Etsy executives have been so supportive, and even the current ones during this transition. And their advice is still the same. Like, of course, I'm in a privileged position where I don't feel like, oh, I have to immediately take something. So that's very much a privilege. But they're like, talk to as many people, network as much as you can. Don't say no to talking to people. I was talking to Ryan, who was our previous CMO, and that was his, like, everyone is telling me that explore what is there and see what resonates with you. And that's how typically most people land their next job, irrespective of the level. I know it's not always that easy. I'm very lucky to have a very strong network.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I mean, I appear as an extrovert, but I think I'm like deep down actually very introverted because
that's hard to believe. I won't talk about Jenn's parting with a large crowd here, but sure, Jenn.
I do love being around people, but it makes me shy to be around people I don't know. And like networking events are usually all people that you don't know. And so I think I don't do a lot of them. But I really believe in the value. So for example, we like a few years ago or before COVID, so God, it's probably like way more than a few years ago now. I made myself a New Year's resolution to do at least like 2 random networking events a year, like women's networking events. And I did one, and out of one of them, I just happened to meet and sit beside and chat with a person who we really got along. And then like, exchange numbers or whatever. And then maybe a year later, I was running data engineering at the time on the infrastructure enablement side, and we didn't have any PMs. There were no PMs in infrastructure. That was kind of the rule. And finally, we were like asking for so long to get funding for a product on the infrastructure enablement side, and we got funding to hire one. And I remembered that person that I met at that place and had dinner with, and I reached out to her and asked her if she was interested, because that was exactly the type of work she did. And we hired her, and she's just been like amazing. And so it's just, you never know, who you're going to meet. And you might go to 10, and this happens all the time to me too. Like you go to 10 and just one of them, some connection happens or works, or like something sparks.
Absolutely. And I've gone to some and I've been so socially awkward there. And just to clarify, being an introvert is also great. I live with one. It balances with my personality type.
Yes. I think just like, I'll move on to the next question. I know we're almost at time, but Thina in the chat said, like, I need to learn to ask more and be more an advocate for myself. And I think being an advocate for yourself is one really huge way that you ask for, is like, that's how you ask for help. Like you advocate for the things that you need. And it's so important, and it's like incredibly empowering. Okay, so I think this last question is a really good one. So let's like put it on the table and hash it out. How do we overcome the fear and guilt? Like, I feel like those two things are usually getting in the way, that often comes with this, like asking for help and then letting go of control. The other side of asking for help is like then letting go of some things because someone else is going to do them for you, help you with them.
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think I'll focus more on the letting go of control aspect of it, because that's so attached to like a high achiever personality type. And it can come in different ways, right? And for me, when I have let go of control and gotten into a more like uncomfortable situation in some ways, is when I have learned the most. That's been the most growth I have personally, professionally had. And that's come in many different ways, right? Like, for Jenn knows this, but for other people's context, I opened Etsy's Mexico office. I was there for a year and a half. I moved with my family and lived in Mexico City, fantastic city. But the job was not an obvious growth path in that sense. Couple of my peers were even like, why are you doing this job? Like, you already have a VP of engineering job. Like, why would you take on the headache of moving to a new country, trying to open an office there? It makes no sense in terms of, but it was a challenging one. We didn't know a word of, like, we knew maybe 5 words of Spanish, but we couldn't form a sentence. And living in Mexico City, like as a family, without knowing Spanish is almost impossible. Like, this was during COVID, so I didn't spend enough time there before when we made the decision to move. It was a very steep learning curve and very uncomfortable. Like, I realized very quickly I need help in many different ways. Someone who can, like, my first day we moved there, my son got stuck in the bathroom. He couldn't unlock the door, and he was much younger then, and we didn't know how to call a locksmith and ask for help. So I realized,
oh my God,
I need help where someone can help my family lead a life till we get better in our Spanish. One, that help I need to ask for. 2, I still had the same portfolio of work as a VP in the US and taken on this new job. I realized I have to drop a few things in my existing one and give it to other people. That always makes you feel, it's a little bit like Lego, right? Oh, I have all this Lego. But once I was able to let go of those Legos, the new kids who got the Lego, they enjoyed it so much, they did it so well.
That's a great way to think about it.
And they grew so much, right? Like, the way to make leaders grow in your organization is give them things that you have and see how they will lead it in many ways differently, but also wonderfully well. Then you have a lot of confidence in them as leaders. And 2, I truly felt like by technically doing less in my broader portfolio, I accelerated my own like personal and professional growth in many different ways. But it was like an uncomfortable combination of things. Asking for help, my family can get stuck in a bathroom here and doesn't know how to get out. 2, like, this is just too much professionally to do at the same time. And letting go of control and giving that to other people was,
I love that answer. I love that answer because I feel like it gets to the heart of what we were saying in the beginning, which is it's hard to ask for help because we feel like we want to do it on our own. But if that resonates with you, then actually you can turn it around and tell yourself, like, it's actually the selfless thing to do to ask people to help you, because it spreads the responsibility, gives other people opportunities. It also creates more space for yourself, and then helps you to also, prioritize your own well-being by creating that space. So huge +1.
Thank you
Hi, Angie.
for this inspiring keynote kicking off our day. It was a lot of excellent advice and stories about doing hard things. So I feel very invigorated by this. So thank you two so much for sharing.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.